My name is Morena. I'm 63, a professor of literature at the University of Madrid. I've taught courses on everything from Greek tragedy to feminist narratives in 20th century Latin American fiction. I've mentored PhD students, published 4 academic books, and spoken at conferences across the world. I know how to read between the lines. I know when a silence speaks louder than any sentence. But nothing, no syllabus, no critical theory, no volume of Borges or Woolf, could have prepared me for what I found waiting for me when I returned from Edinburgh last weekend. It was raining when I landed. The taxi ride from Barajas was long, and my bones ached from the flight. But none of it mattered, because I was headed to see Daniel, my only son, and his children, my twin grandsons, Julian and Matteo. I hadn't seen them in over a month. They had just turned 5. I'd mailed presents from Scotland, matching stuffed Highland cows and books of fairy tales from the Isles. Daniel had sounded warm on the phone. "Mama, the boys miss you. Come stay with us this weekend. You'll love what Sophia's done with the garden." Sophia, my daughter-in-law, 38, ambitious, always polished. If I'm honest, we've never truly connected. She smiled at holidays, offered to make tea, asked about my lectures. But there was something about her politeness, something too smooth, too careful, like she'd memorized her lines for a play in which I was a minor character she barely tolerated. Still, I didn't care. I wasn't visiting for her. Daniel met me at the door, smiling, but the warmth I remembered flickered. His hug was brief. "The boys are playing outside with Sophia. Go surprise them," he said, already backing into the house like a host greeting a guest, not a son welcoming his mother. The house felt different. It used to buzz with the chaos of children's toys and spontaneous hugs. Now it felt curated. Too clean, too perfect, like a magazine layout. The scent of lavender hung faintly in the air, artificial and calculated. I placed my suitcase in the guest room, the one Sophia once casually referred to as the spare. In the living room, I spotted the album. It sat on the coffee table like bait, leather-bound, with golden embossed letters that spelled "Our Family." My chest tightened. Sophia had started compiling it shortly after the twins were born. I used to be proud of it. Page after page of smiles, milestones, trips to the coast, all captured in glossy 4 or 6. I reached out, almost without thinking, and opened it. What I saw made my throat close. The first photo was of Julian's first birthday. I remember that day. I wore a maroon dress, brought him a hand-carved wooden train from Toledo. I remember crouching beside his high chair, holding the cake while everyone sang. In the album, I wasn't in the photo. No, not just absent. I had been there. I knew I had been there. But there was a sharp edge where the photo had been trimmed. A sliver of my sleeve remained. A ghost of presence. My hands began to tremble as I flipped the next page. Christmas, 2 years ago. I had dressed as Santa. The boys laughed so hard they hiccuped. I held them both for the photo in front of the fireplace. Gone. The image had been neatly edited. Daniel, Sophia, and the twins smiled before the fire. Where I should have been was now a clean blur, replaced with more garland. As if I had never stood there. As if I had never held them. I turned another page. Daniel's university graduation. I'd flown back from Paris to attend. I'd wept as he walked the stage, my proudest moment. In the album, he stood alone. Even the crowd had been cropped out. It looked clinical, sterile. I flipped faster now, each page a fresh slap. The twins' second birthday party, Easter brunch, Sophia's baby shower, Daniel's birthday dinner at the lake. Photo after photo, event after event, meticulously scrubbed of my existence. I couldn't breathe. My throat burned. And then I reached the final page. A single recent photograph. Julian and Matteo sat between their parents, smiling. On the table in front of them, a birthday cake shaped like a pirate ship. At the bottom of the page, handwritten in looping black marker, were the words, "The worst grandmother in the world." The breath left my body. For a moment, I wondered if I was hallucinating. Maybe the jet lag was playing tricks. Maybe this was someone's sick idea of a joke, but no. The ink was dry. The edges were smooth. The insult was deliberate. It wasn't just erasure, it was defamation, condemnation. The twins would one day look through this album and believe that their grandmother had never loved them, never celebrated them, never been there at all, that she was the worst. I sat frozen, fingers still pressed to the album cover. My mind replayed every birthday, every bedtime story, every trip to the zoo, every time I'd driven 4 hours just to tuck them in, every scarf I'd knitted, every night I'd stayed up helping Daniel with his master's thesis, rocking the twins while Sophia took self-care days. And this was how they repaid me? I didn't hear Sophia come in. "Oh, you're here," she said, her voice perfectly even. "The boys are in the yard." I looked up. Her eyes flicked toward the album on my lap. For a moment, the corner of her mouth twitched. A tell. I closed the book gently. My hands no longer shook. "It's good to see you, Sophia," I said, standing. My voice was calm, quiet, eerily even. "I brought you something." Her brows raised in surprise. I walked upstairs, opened my suitcase, and took out the blue folder. Thick, sealed, stamped confidential. I placed it on the nightstand of the guest room. Let her find it. Let her open it. Let her try to explain it away once it reached Daniel's hands. Once the family saw it. Once the truth came bleeding into their curated little world. They thought they'd erased me. They were wrong, because I never forget the truth, and I never leave a betrayal unanswered. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the guest bed, its pillows too firm, its sheets too crisp, its silence too hostile. Outside the room, the house hummed faintly, with life that no longer belonged to me. From the other side of the wall, I heard murmurs. Sophia's voice, clipped and practiced. Daniel's, quieter, unsure. They were speaking about me. I didn't need to catch the words to know their shape. She found the album. Just ignore it. She's sensitive. She shouldn't have been snooping. I closed my eyes and wished for a moment I could make time flow backward. Just one day. Just to before I opened that album. But regrets are luxuries for people who haven't been abandoned before. I turned onto my side, curling toward the wall like I used to do in those early years, when Daniel was still small enough to sleep with his arm draped across my chest, when his steady breathing lulled me into the only peace I knew. His father had left us when Daniel was 6. One moment, I was folding laundry on a rainy afternoon. The next, I was watching Andres walk out with a duffel bag and the last shred of our stability. He said he wasn't happy. He said he was tired. He said he hadn't meant to fall in love with his coworker. But what could he do? He needed to feel alive again. And I needed to survive. We had exactly $120 in the checking account and 2 more weeks until rent was due. I remember crouching down that evening to Daniel's level, brushing his hair back gently. "Is he coming back, Mama?" he asked. "No, mi vida," I said, "but it's going to be okay." And it was, because I made it okay. I took a job at the university teaching 2 courses I hadn't even read for. I smiled through exhaustion, pretending to be more knowledgeable than I felt. And when that wasn't enough, I took a second job at the library shelving books, cleaning floors, and closing late into the night. The janitor taught me how to use the industrial vacuum. I taught myself how to swallow the shame of being overqualified and still underpaid. We ate a lot of lentils those first months. Daniel never complained. When he needed new shoes for school and I didn't have the money, I told him I'd forgotten mine too, so we could make it a game. 2 barefoot adventurers waiting for a treasure. I sold my antique brooch, a gift from my grandmother, to pay for his school trip to Seville. He brought me back a pebble from the Guadalquivir River, which I still keep in a small box, with his baby teeth and a ribbon from his first communion. Every night I came home long after sunset. I would find Daniel asleep at the table, his notebook open, tiny hands smudged with pencil. I'd lift him in my arms and carry him to bed, whispering stories I made up as I went. Tales about women who fought dragons alone and always, always won. He was my reason, my compass, my anchor. When he got into university, I cried. Not because I was sad he was leaving, but because we had done it, together. I remember him calling me after his first semester, panicked about a literature exam. Mama, I don't understand symbolism in La Regenta. We spent 2 hours on the phone going over it. I pulled out my old notes and quoted from memory. He passed. He thanked me by mailing me a postcard with a line scrawled on the back. Everything I am, I owe to you. I kept that postcard. I still have it. So how did we get here? To this cold guest room. To a photo album that had been doctored like history under a dictatorship, every trace of me sliced away. To a handwritten label calling me the worst grandmother in the world. It made me wonder what stories Sophia was telling the boys about me. Was she framing me as difficult, cold, overbearing? Was she turning my sacrifices into complaints, my love into burden? Had she rewritten my role so thoroughly that Daniel believed it too? I thought of Julian and Mateo, their soft curls and bright eyes. I thought of the time I spent building a pirate ship in the yard with them. The time Julian fell and scraped his knee and cried, and I was the one who held him until he fell asleep. The bedtime stories, the cookies, the handmade Halloween costumes. I thought of all of it. And then I remembered what I had slipped into that blue folder. Documents, receipts, letters. One photo Sophia didn't know I still had. The one where Daniel, at 10, clutched a birthday cake I made in the shape of a book, with icing that said, "To my favorite story, you." I sat up in bed, the moonlight brushing across the room like a spotlight, and I made a quiet vow. I would not let her win. I would not let this woman erase me from my own bloodline. I would not allow my son to forget who held him when he was broken, who built the life he now lives, brick by sleepless brick. I would not allow my grandsons to grow up with only half a history, one sanitized of struggle, of love, of truth. I had given everything for this family. I deserved more than pity and polite silences. I deserved memory, and now I would fight for it. Not with yelling, not with guilt, but with truth, because I did not survive abandonment, poverty, loneliness, and 30 years of sacrifice just to be discarded when I became inconvenient. No, I am Morena. I am his mother, and I am not going anywhere. The morning after the album, I awoke with a weight in my chest I hadn't felt in years, not the sharp sting of betrayal, that had settled into something heavier, duller, more permanent. No, this was the weight of memory. I pushed off the stiff guest room covers, walked toward the window, and looked down into the backyard. The boys' sandbox was untouched. Their toy pirate ship sat half-buried in the corner, forgotten. There had been a time when I was the captain of that ship, sailing them through imaginary storms and treasure hunts. Julian used to shout, "Grandma, we're going to the Monster Island," and I would throw a scarf over my head and become the sea witch. I hadn't realized until this moment how many of those memories lived only in me now. I turned to grab my journal from the nightstand drawer, and that's when I saw it. Tucked beneath a stack of guest towels was a bright yellow envelope, slightly crumpled, speckled with glitter. My name was written on the front in lopsided child's handwriting, to Grandma Morena. I froze. My fingers hovered over it like I was touching something sacred. When I pulled it out and opened it, my heart split open. Inside was a folded piece of construction paper, decorated with stars and stick figures. 2 children stood beside a woman with curly gray hair and a crown. We were holding hands. The message read, "Dear Grandma, I miss you. Mateo says maybe you're on a trip. But I don't think so, because you always tell us when you go. Are you okay? We love your pirate voices. Mommy says maybe you're busy, but I think you still want to come. I love you. Love, Julian. Mateo says hi too." I sat down on the bed, the card shaking in my hands. They didn't forget me. They missed me. They wondered why I had vanished from their lives, and the answer they were given was a lie. I clutched the card to my chest and looked toward the door. That's when it clicked. This wasn't a letter I missed in the mail. This wasn't something left out in the open. It had been hidden, deliberately stuffed away beneath towels. Sophia didn't just manipulate my image. She actively concealed the proof that my grandson still loved me. She was rewriting the narrative with surgical precision. One story for the boys. Grandma's just busy. Another for Daniel. They don't really care if she visits. One more for me. They're too young to notice, but she had made one mistake. She hadn't destroyed the evidence. I folded the card carefully and tucked it into my purse. Within the hour, I was in my car, driving to the boys' school, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. When I walked into the front office, the secretary looked up and immediately smiled. "You must be Morena," she said. "We've heard a lot about you." That nearly knocked the air from my lungs. She motioned for me to wait, and a few minutes later, I was sitting in a sunlit office across from a young woman with bright eyes and short hair. Ms. Figueroa. "Oh my gosh," she said. "Julian talks about you every week, and Mateo too. You're the pirate queen, right?" I swallowed. "That's what they call me?" "All the time," she smiled. "They even made drawings of you last month for our family heroes wall. You taught them to draw treasure maps?" I nodded slowly, remembering that rainy afternoon last year. "Yes, that was us." Her face clouded a bit, reading the tension in mine. "Is something wrong?" I hesitated. Then I told her, cautiously, gently, that I hadn't been allowed to visit recently, that Sophia had told me the boys were too busy or too tired, or that I wasn't needed. Ms. Figueroa's smile faded completely. "That's strange. We had family day a few weeks ago, and Julian was so sure you'd be here. He kept looking at the door. When you didn't come, he got really quiet." My stomach clenched. I never even knew about family day. "We were told you weren't available," she said slowly, as if the words tasted wrong. "Sophia said you'd canceled." I blinked. "No. She never even told me." The teacher's eyes softened. "That's awful. I'm so sorry." "No," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "Thank you. You've helped more than you know." I left the school in a daze, the teacher's words echoing in my ears. He kept looking at the door. They thought I didn't come because I didn't care. They didn't know the door had been locked from the other side. As I drove home, I thought about the thousands of ways Sophia had poisoned my presence. The orchestrated absences, the subtle erasures, the clipped, curated conversations with Daniel that made me seem petty, outdated, or intrusive. And he had believed her, because Daniel, for all his intelligence, had always wanted harmony. And Sophia offered him the illusion of it, polished and convenient, even if it meant I became a ghost. But ghosts, when summoned, tend to speak. And I was done whispering. I parked in front of their house, the blue folder still tucked under my arm. Tonight, I would set things in motion. This wasn't just about reclaiming my place. It was about giving my grandsons the truth, before it was too late. The drive from Valencia to Madrid was a blur. My hands clung to the steering wheel, but my thoughts drifted miles away, to glitter-glued envelopes and two little boys waiting by doors that would never open. To school teachers confused by my absence. To a mother who had turned motherhood into manipulation. By the time I reached the edge of the city, the sky had turned the color of rust, dusk was settling, and so was my resolve. I didn't go home. I drove to a small cafe, tucked between a laundromat and a pharmacy, the kind of place that hadn't changed in 30 years. It was where Eduardo and I used to meet after lectures, when we were young and idealistic, and thought we'd conquer the world with poetry and espresso. Eduardo had chosen the booth in the back, as always. Back to the wall, eyes on the door. He looked older, sure, but no less sharp. That same weathered briefcase sat beside him, like a relic from another life. "Morena," he said as I approached, "you look like someone who just discovered her house was built on a graveyard." I smiled thinly and sat down. "Close. More like I built the house brick by brick, and now they're pretending I never lived there." He nodded slowly, understanding without asking. Eduardo always had that gift. "I found a card," I said, "from Julian. Hidden. Sophia never gave it to me." "Where?" "In a drawer, buried under towels. He said they miss me, said they wonder why I don't come anymore." Eduardo's jaw flexed. He reached into his coat and pulled out his phone, scrolling for a moment before handing it to me. It was a photo, taken from a courier service's back-end system. There, clearly labeled, was my name and address. Blocked for delivery. Return to sender. She filed a restriction, Eduardo said. Told them you're no contact. Said you're unstable. They've been refusing your packages since December. My chest felt tight. She lied to the courier? She provided a statement, he continued. Said you were harassing the family. Claimed emotional abuse. That you were escalating. That's not true, I whispered. I know. But on paper, she's just protecting the kids. It's a smart lie. Soft, believable. No one questions a mother acting in defense of her children. I pressed a hand to my temple. And the boys? They don't know. They think I just disappeared. Eduardo reached for his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were photos of parcels, wrapped toys, books, even a scarf I had knitted in January. All labeled, all undelivered. There's more, he said, sliding a stack of printouts across the table. Social media, private posts. But I've got friends. I looked at the first one. It was a selfie of Sophia, polished as always, cradling one of the boys in her lap. The caption read, "Some people cling to titles instead of earning them. A real grandmother shows up emotionally, not just for photos. Grateful my kids are too young to remember the coldness. Breaking cycles, warm boundaries, our love." I scrolled. Post after post painted me as a distant, self-involved matriarch. Comments from her friends, people I'd never even met, offered sympathy. You're doing the right thing, Sophia. Protect your peace. You're not obligated to include toxic relatives just because of blood. One even said, kids don't need passive-aggressive grandmas in their lives. It was all there. The perfect character assassination. Not a single word loud enough to trigger legal action, but together they formed a noose. She's building a case, Eduardo said quietly. Not legally, socially. She wants people to believe you were never part of the family. She's writing me out of their history, I said. No, he corrected. She's writing herself in as the savior. You're just the villain she needed to make it a compelling story. I sat back, stunned by the clarity of it all, and furious. I want to respond, I said. He raised an eyebrow. I want to show the world what really happened. Every school lunch, every tuition payment, every night I stayed up with Daniel when he had the flu, reading to him from The Little Prince while his fever broke. Eduardo leaned forward. You want to build a dossier? Yes. Not just for Sophia. For Daniel, and for the boys. When they're old enough to understand. He nodded. Then we do this properly. Every receipt, every card, every old photo, statements from neighbors, teachers, your colleagues at the university. Hell, I'll get the registrar to confirm every scholarship you applied for him. My eyes burned. Thank you, Eduardo. This is your story, Morena, he said. It's time you reclaimed it. He pushed over a notepad. Start listing everything you remember. Every proof, every injustice. I opened it, hands steady now. At the top of the page, I wrote, The truth. And below it, Julian's hidden card. Returned packages. School family day incident. Sophia's social media slander. Photo, Daniel's 10th birthday cake. Bank transfers for Daniel's college tuition. Copy of my will, showing the boys were included. My journals, 30 years dated. Eduardo looked it over and nodded. This will shake the ground beneath her feet. And if she tries to twist this, I asked, she'll have to explain why a cold, distant woman kept every crayon drawing and paid for her son's education in full. I felt something shift inside me. Not rage, not pain. Power. Sophia wanted me silent, but I had lived my life in pages and ink. Now, I would make my words count. Not for vengeance, but for legacy. For truth. For love. I had cooked for him like it was his birthday. Chicken stock simmered for hours. Saffron bloomed in warm broth. I sliced fresh bell peppers and cleaned mussels until my hands ached. Every movement reminded me of the boy who used to sit at my kitchen table with a comic book in one hand and a fork in the other, kicking his legs beneath the chair. Now he was a man, a husband, a father, and somehow, despite everything I gave him, a stranger. I had cleaned the apartment like it mattered. Not for show, for something else, for memory, for dignity. I even found the old ceramic pitcher he'd painted in second grade, blue and green and terrible, and filled it with daisies. Daniel arrived just past 7. He looked tired, creased at the eyes, worry lines forming at the corners of his mouth. He kissed my cheek stiffly, then stepped inside, glancing around as if seeing the place for the first time. "It smells amazing in here," he said. "Haven't had your paella since before the boys were born." "Too long," I said simply. We ate in silence. I could feel him trying to work up the courage to ask why I'd invited him, but I didn't rush. Let him taste the food. Let the wine ease the stiffness from his voice. Finally, when we finished, I brought the black binder from the counter and placed it between us. He stared at it. "What's this?" "The truth," I said. "The story your sons will one day ask about, and the one you've forgotten." He opened the binder, slowly. The first page. Julian's handmade card. I watched his mouth fall open. He touched the crayon drawing like it might crumble under his fingers. "I never saw this," he murmured. "No, because Sophia hid it from me, and from you." His eyes flicked up to mine. Then page after page, he read in silence, each one heavier than the last. Returned parcels, toys and letters never delivered, birthday cards unopened, postmarks dated and stamped, returned to sender. Sophia had claimed I was too busy to send anything. Next, the family day incident. A statement from the twins' teacher. How Sophia told them I had canceled, when I had never even been informed. Then the screenshots, her carefully curated social media persona, long captions about toxic relatives, and healing from intergenerational coldness. Me, painted as the villain in a story I had authored with sweat and sacrifice. Daniel rubbed his temples. "I didn't know," he said again, but softer this time. Cracked. "No," I said. "You chose not to know." He snapped his head up. "That's not fair." I leaned forward. "Isn't it? Mama, I've been trying to manage things." "Manage what? Your wife's disdain for me? Your fear of confrontation? Did you ever once stop to ask me why I pulled away? Or did you just assume I had finally become the distant mother Sophia always claimed I was?" He swallowed. "I thought, maybe you were tired, or you'd changed." I smiled, bitter. "I haven't changed, Daniel. I have fought every day of my life to stay present. I raised you on nothing but borrowed hope and student loans. I stayed up nights working so you could have tutors and clean shoes and a future. I built your life from the inside out. And then I watched from the curb while your wife locked the doors behind me." He said nothing, so I pressed on. "You let her paint me as cold, while I kept every crayon drawing you ever gave me. You let her claim I was manipulative, while I've sacrificed every inch of pride just to stay in your sons' lives." His eyes filled. I didn't know how to stop it. "No," I said. "You didn't want to risk the comfort of your silence." The room was still. Then his voice, quiet and shaking. "I see it now. All of it. I thought keeping peace was love. I thought if I didn't argue, if I stayed neutral." "Neutral," I repeated, my voice sharp. "There is no neutrality in erasure. There's only complicity." He looked down. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry, Mama." I let that settle. Then I took his hand. "I'm not asking you to choose between your wife and your mother. I'm asking you to choose between truth and convenience." He looked up, eyes red. "What do I do?" "Start by telling the boys the truth," I said. "Tell them I never stopped loving them, that I tried to visit, that the gifts they never saw were sent, that the stories I told them were never forgotten." He nodded slowly. "I will." "And then," I added, "tell your wife this ends now. No more block deliveries. No more false narratives. I will not be a phantom grandmother in my own bloodline." He nodded again, but this time with something new in his face. Resolve? I was afraid, he whispered. But I can't be anymore. I owe you more than that. Yes, I said, you do. And as the candle flickered between us, I saw in him, not the boy I had raised, nor the man Sophia had molded, but something in between. Someone still capable of remembering who taught him how to love in the first place. Sophia agreed to therapy 2 days after Daniel confronted her. It's time we clear the air, she'd said. We owe it to the boys. Her tone, Daniel told me, was calm. Too calm. She spoke like a woman choosing the battlefield, not surrendering, but repositioning. I'll go, I said when Daniel relayed the news. But I'm not waiting for that session to reclaim my place. He hesitated. What do you mean? I mean, I said, we've had years of silence. 1 hour with a therapist won't undo what's already been done. She's curated my absence like it's part of the decor. That ends now. He didn't argue, maybe because he knew the science fair was coming. Julian had been working on his project for weeks, something about cloud formation, complete with a mini water cycle and a fog machine. I had asked Sophia weeks ago if I could attend. Her answer, at the time, had been, "They're still adjusting. It's probably best if you sit this one out." But now I had an invitation in my inbox. Daniel had overridden her. I told the school to expect you, he said. You deserve to be there. I didn't tell him that I'd already bought Julian a gift, a real microscope, one I found from a retired biologist on the other side of Madrid. It had been polished and wrapped in dark green paper, and underneath it, I had packed the binder. My story, evidence, proof, all wrapped in a quiet kind of fury. The school was crowded when I arrived. Children in white coats, posters lined along the walls, their projects sparkling with foil and last-minute glue. I spotted Julian before anyone else. He was near the back, proudly gesturing at his model, while Mateo clapped beside him. Daniel stood nearby. Sophia, too. She wore high heels too sharp for a school auditorium, and a soft white blouse that made her look saintly under the fluorescent lights. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed just enough, but her smile didn't falter. "Morena," she said with perfect composure. "What a surprise!" I returned her smile. "Hardly. Daniel said you'd be expecting me." Julian's face lit up. "Grandma, you came!" He threw his arms around me before I could respond. The weight of him, bigger now, heavier, was like a memory come back to life. "Of course I came, Michiello. I wouldn't miss it." He pointed at his display proudly. "I made clouds with cotton balls, and real fog." "You're brilliant," I said, meaning it. Then I turned to Sophia. "I brought him something," I said. "A microscope, and something else." Her eyes flicked to the binder I carried. "What's that?" "Something that belongs to your family," I said, stepping past her. The school announcements began soon after, calling everyone into the auditorium. The principal spoke first, then teachers, then the children, each one stepping up to describe their projects. Julian spoke like a boy who believed the world would always applaud him. His joy was radiant, his pride so real it made my chest ache. Afterward, the principal invited any family members who wished to speak. Most parents shook their heads. I stood. Sophia tensed immediately. Daniel looked unsure. Julian beamed. I stepped forward to the small podium. My voice didn't shake. "I'll be brief," I said, eyes sweeping the small crowd. "I want to say how proud I am of my grandson. Of both of them. Watching them grow has been one of the greatest joys of my life." Polite applause. "But there's something else I need to share." The room quieted. "For the past 2 years, I have been missing from many of your lives. Absent from birthdays, from holidays, from school events. Some of you may have wondered why." Sophia stood slowly. "Morena, maybe this isn't—" "It is," I said sharply. "It is exactly the time." She froze. "I wasn't absent by choice," I continued. "I was excluded. I sent gifts that were returned, letters that were hidden. I was told my grandsons were too busy to speak to me. that I was forgotten, but they didn't forget. And I never stopped trying. I held up the binder. This is a record of everything I sent. Every card, every letter, every photograph I still kept. It's proof, not just of love, but of effort. Sophia's mouth was tight, pale. I don't want pity, I said. And I'm not asking for applause. I'm asking for truth, for clarity, for children to grow up knowing all sides of their family. I turned to Julian and Mateo. I love you. I always have. I always will. And no matter what stories you're told, I want you to know, your grandmother never left you. Julian smiled wide. Mateo clapped softly. Around me, murmurs began, parents whispering, eyes flicking from Sophia to me. And Daniel? He stood, slowly, then crossed the floor and placed his hand on my shoulder. She's telling the truth, he said. All of it. Sophia looked like stone. I let it happen, Daniel added, but I won't anymore. And just like that, the curtain lifted. The story was no longer Sophia's to control. After the science fair, things didn't erupt, not right away. They simmered, just like a volcano. Not every eruption comes with warning sirens and ash in the sky. Some begin slowly, a crack in the earth, a shift in tone, a child asking for a story their mother hoped they would forget. And that's what Julian did. Before I left that day, as the crowd dispersed, he wrapped his arms around my waist and looked up at me with pure, unquestioning faith. Can you come to dinner, Grandma? This weekend? See, Sophia, who had been pretending to check her phone, froze. Her eyes snapped up, and in that half-second between inhale and reply, I saw it all. The calculation, the fear, the fury she couldn't afford to show. Then she smiled. Of course she can, she said, and kissed Julian's head. Daniel's face was unreadable, but when he turned to me, I saw it. Not guilt, not even shame. Resolve. The invitation arrived formally the next day, a text message, short and civil. Dinner Saturday, CPM. Hope you're free. Sophia. Hope. A word Sophia hadn't used in years, especially not directed at me. I stared at the screen for a full minute before replying, I'll be there, and I'll bring something for the boys. She responded with a thumbs up, nothing else. But the message behind the message was clear. Let's keep this polite. Let's keep it clean. Let's control the damage. But I wasn't coming to cause damage. I was coming to lift the veil. All week I prepared. The binder had grown heavier, not just in weight, but in meaning. I had added the photo of Daniel's first backpack, the receipt from the bookstore where I bought him his first copy of Don Quixote, annotated with my own notes. I added a printed email from Julian's teacher, dated 2 years ago, thanking me for helping him with a school poem. A poem Sophia had claimed she'd written with him. Each page was a piece of my erasure, reclaimed. And at the bottom of my bag, wrapped carefully in tissue and twine, was the microscope for Julian. And the volcano book, the volcano that wouldn't sleep. I chose it for a reason. Not just because of the science, because of the story inside. About a volcano ignored for so long, dismissed, forgotten, until it finally roared. Not to destroy, but to be heard. Their house was warm when I arrived. Too warm. The heat dialed just a touch higher than comfort. A passive-aggressive kind of hospitality. I stepped inside, and the scent of roasted chicken and thyme drifted through the air. Sophia greeted me at the door. Lipstick perfect. Dress soft, maternal. Her smile didn't touch her eyes. Morena, she said. Glad you could make it. I handed her the gift bag, Julian's microscope, and a book. She took it, nodded once, then gestured inside. Daniel came out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. He smiled, a real one, and hugged me. It was tight, lingering. When he pulled back, his eyes were misted. You look good, Mama. So do you, I said, placing a hand on his cheek. The boys ran in moments later, laughing, shouting about lava and rain clouds. Julian hugged me again and pulled me toward the living room, where his science fair ribbon now hung on the wall. Grandma, will you read me the volcano book after dinner? I'd love to, I said. We sat down at the table. 5 places. Cloth napkins. Stemmed glasses. Sophia served with quiet ceremony. Her hands never trembled, but her silence was brittle. Dinner passed in polite conversation. Daniel asked about the university. Matteo told a joke about spaghetti I couldn't understand. And everyone laughed anyway. Sophia offered wine like a hostess on autopilot. But I waited. Waited until dessert. Lemon tart. Store-bought but plated neatly with a drizzle of something that looked like raspberry. Then, without raising my voice, I reached into my bag and pulled out the binder. I set it beside my plate. Daniel's eyes went wide. Sophia stiffened. Julian leaned over, curious. I brought something else, I said, voice calm. Something I think this family needs to see. Mama, Daniel said, a warning but not a protest. It's okay, I said. It's time. Sophia's jaw clenched. Morena, this is not revenge, I said, cutting across her gently but firmly. It's restoration. This is the truth. And you can't keep bearing it under politeness. Julian blinked. What is it? I opened the binder. This is the story of how your grandmother never stopped loving you, even when she wasn't allowed to say it. Sophia stood abruptly. I don't think this is appropriate. Sit down, Daniel said, without looking at her. She did. I turned the pages. Cards, drawings, birthday photos. Every package returned. Every letter unopened. School events I hadn't been told about. Receipts. Emails. Voicemails. Screenshots. A paper trail of love. Obstructed, denied, twisted. I was told I was too busy, I said. That I didn't want to visit. That I was difficult. That I was cold. I looked at Daniel. You believed it? He nodded slowly. I was afraid, he whispered. I know. Sophia finally spoke. Her voice was tight. This is manipulation. No, I said. That was manipulation. This is clarity. This is memory with timestamps. I reached the final page, a note I'd written to Daniel, never sent, dated the day he graduated. It read, I did it all for you, even this silence, but I won't be silent anymore, not when they still have time to remember me properly. Daniel closed the binder slowly. Tears slipped down his face. Sophia said nothing. Julian looked from me to his parents, unsure but listening. This was not a courtroom, but the verdict was clear. There was something eerie in the air, not fear, not even rage, just stillness. The kind that falls after a fire has finished devouring a forest. Everything is still standing, technically, but scorched, quiet, uncertain. Julian clutched the corner of the volcano book on his lap, his brow furrowed in confusion and sadness. Matteo had fallen silent, his hand in mine, watching his mother the way small children do when they sense the house has shifted, but don't yet have the words for what's crumbling. Sophia hadn't spoken in several minutes. Her wineglass sat untouched. The wax from the taper candle at the center of the table had pooled into the table runner. She was blinking fast, trying, and failing, to maintain her usual tight composure. Daniel said nothing either. He had pushed his plate away and sat with his elbows on the table, his hands clenched as if trying to hold the silence together. Then she said it. I've always envied you. Her voice was barely more than a breath, and yet it rang like a bell through the room. I didn't answer. I just watched her as she inhaled shakily and continued, like someone trying to tear off a bandage, but not knowing if the wound underneath was still bleeding. You always knew what to say. You always had control of a room. Even when I met you the first time, you looked at me like you already knew how things would go. Like I was just another shadow in your son's story. I exhaled quietly. That wasn't the first time I'd heard something like that from a woman Daniel had dated, but I'd never imagined it would define my future daughter-in-law's relationship with me. Sophia's voice cracked now, exposing a pain she clearly hadn't expected to reveal tonight. I wanted to be the one they remembered, she whispered. The one who packed the lunches, planned the birthdays, made the rules. But you sent 1 box of cookies, and they'd forget I'd spent 3 hours on a cake. You told one story, and suddenly, I was invisible. Daniel's face hardened. So you tried to make her invisible. She didn't deny it. I just wanted to be seen, she said. And you erased her to do it, he replied, voice cold. Julian looked between them. What does that mean? I leaned down, touching his cheek gently. It means sometimes grown-ups make mistakes when they feel scared. Mateo whispered. Were you scared, Mommy? Sophia blinked at her son, stunned. I guess I was. Daniel wasn't done. You told them she didn't want to come, that she was cold, that she didn't care. You made them believe they weren't loved. Sophia turned to him now. I was alone in this house. You worked long hours. Your mom had her job, her books, her students. I had diapers and teething and crying at 3 a.m., and no one told me I was doing anything right. So you punished my mother for being strong? He asked. She looked down at her lap. Yes. The admission landed like a stone. It was the kind of truth you never expect to hear spoken aloud. The secret behind every tiny rejection, every quiet betrayal. Sophia had never truly hated me. She'd feared me, because I reminded her that love wasn't something she could control, that my presence, even quiet, even from a distance, threatened the story she was trying to write, a story in which she was the center of the boys' universe, the only one they remembered. She looked up now, her face streaked with mascara and honesty. I didn't want to share them. You don't own them, Daniel said, his voice cracking for the first time. She looked like he'd slapped her, but he didn't soften. Not this time. We're not doing this anymore, he said. From now on, there are no more games, no more controlling who they talk to, who they see, what they believe. If they want to ask questions, they'll get answers. Real ones. He turned to the boys. Do you want to know who sent those dinosaur books? Who left gifts on the porch, even when they were never opened? Julian and Mateo nodded, eyes wide. Your grandmother, he said. Every time. She never forgot you. She never stopped loving you. Julian leaned forward slowly. Even when we didn't say thank you? Especially then, I said softly, because I knew you hadn't been allowed. Mateo whispered. Why didn't you tell us sooner? I touched his small hand. Because I didn't want to hurt you. I thought if I just waited, maybe things would change. Julian's eyes filled. I don't want you to wait anymore. That undid me. I pulled both boys into my arms and held them there. No performance, no drama. Just warmth, breath, and the sheer miracle of being allowed back in. Sophia looked on in silence. Her face had crumpled. All the sharp edges were gone now, eroded by the undeniable truth around her. She wasn't the center of this story. She never had been. But that didn't mean she couldn't still be part of it, if she chose honesty over fear. Finally, quietly, she said, I don't expect forgiveness. But I'm sorry. Daniel looked at her long and hard. I'm not asking you to be perfect, he said, but you will never lie to them again. She nodded, slowly. The family, as it had existed until now, was done. The version where silence was safety and control was love. It had been dismantled in one night, over one binder and a pile of returned gifts. But in its place, there was something fragile, something broken, but real. And that, maybe, was the first step towards something better. 6 months is a short time in the grand arc of family, but long enough for things to begin again. It began slowly. The spring that followed was full of false starts, therapy appointments that ended in silence, missed calls, awkward dinners where everyone smiled too hard. But something had shifted in the soil. The roots, once poisoned by silence and pride, had found new water. Healing came not in grand gestures, but in the repetition of small, honest ones. I began seeing the boys regularly. At first, just Sunday visits, then Wednesday pickups from school. By June, they asked to spend a whole weekend with me. No prompting, no suggestion. Just 2 boys who remembered that love didn't need to be loud to be real. Julian told his science teacher I helped him build the Saturn model. Mateo asked his art class to draw Grandma's house from memory. And when he showed it to me, I wept. It was a perfect sketch. My window, my lemon tree, my chipped teacup on the porch. He had never stayed overnight until that point, but somehow he had memorized everything. Daniel, for his part, was learning how to be a single father. He asked for help, sometimes haltingly, like the habit of holding in too much still clung to his voice. I listened. I didn't lecture. I was no longer here to prove I had been right. I was here because I'd never stopped loving him, even in silence. And Sophia, well, Sophia and I would never be best friends. That was never the point. But something about watching her let go of control made me see her differently. She wasn't cruel. She was scared. And fear had made her lash out, isolate, protect what wasn't under threat. We spoke once a week during therapy, sometimes more. One day, during our 4th session, she admitted, "I used to think motherhood was a contest I had to win." I looked her in the eyes and said, "It's not a contest, it's a legacy." She didn't cry, but she swallowed hard and nodded. In July, the boys invited me to their school's summer showcase. Julian read a poem he wrote himself called Volcanoes and Grandmas. It made no sense scientifically, but it made perfect emotional sense. Mateo painted a galaxy and labeled one of the planets Morena. I hung that painting in my kitchen, but nothing, not even those moments, prepared me for what Sophia did next. One Sunday, I arrived early. Julian ran out to greet me and dragged me into the living room, his voice bouncing off the walls. "Grandma, we made something. It's not a surprise anymore, but you have to come see." I followed him in, expecting a drawing, a thank you card, maybe another volcano. But there, sitting on the coffee table, was the family album. The same one. The one from months ago. The one I had once found gutted of every trace of me, its pages cold and silent. Only now it was heavier. Wider. It had grown. The cover had been cleaned. The worn leather now carried a new title, embossed in gold foil by hand. Nuestra Historia. Our Story. Julian opened it proudly. The first page was new. A full photo of me, black and white, holding baby Daniel in the hospital, my eyes still swollen from birth, my hair a mess, but my smile luminous. The next page was a handwritten letter, Sophia's handwriting. It read, "We once thought love was something to be measured. Now we know it is something to be honored. This section is for the woman who never stopped showing up, even when the door was locked, for the grandmother who gave our sons roots before they knew how to name them, for the mother who held our family together, even when she was pushed out. This is your space, Morena. It always should have been." The next few pages were filled with photos I hadn't seen in years. Daniel's high school graduation. A trip to the coast where he had fallen asleep on my lap. A Mother's Day card he'd made in 5th grade, where he called me La Mujer Más Valiente del Mundo. The boys had drawn around the photos with glitter pens. Mateo had glued a paper crown above one photo of me, reading to them. Julian pointed to it. "That one's my favorite." I blinked quickly. My voice wouldn't come. Sophia appeared in the doorway then. She didn't smile at first. She just said, "I thought it was time you were put back where you belonged." I nodded. Not because I was whole, but because I was healing. That night, we all sat in the living room eating burnt pizza, flipping through the album together. No grand speeches, no orchestral music, just hands turning pages, just voices telling stories. Just love, quiet, steady, earned. I never needed to win. All I ever wanted was to be remembered with truth. And now, I was. Not as the worst grandmother in the world, but as Morena, the woman who didn't disappear, even when they tried to erase her. This wasn't a story about victory. It was about restoration, about reclaiming not just my place, but my dignity, about teaching my grandchildren, and my son, that love isn't loud, but it is unrelenting, and that truth, once spoken, has a way of echoing across generations.